Hi, my name is Michael Sinatra, and my new album, Standards 2, the Deluxe Edition, is available everywhere you listen to music. And you're listening to U.S. Modernist Radio.
Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Oh, I don't care what Mama don't allow, gonna draw mine modern anyhow. Mama don't allow no architecture around here.
Welcome to U.S. Modernist Radio, where we talk and laugh with people who enjoy, own, create, dream about, preserve, love, and hate modernist architecture, the most exciting and controversial buildings in the world. I'm Tom Guild. Los Angeles architect Ray Kappe attended Emerson Middle School, which was designed by Richard Neutra. He graduated with honors from the University of California at Berkeley in 1951, and he went on his own in 1954, completing dozens of modernist houses and teaching. After serving as founding chairman of the Department of Architecture at Cal Poly Pomona, Kappe resigned in 1972, and he started the Southern California Institute of Architecture, better known as SCI-ARC, the Hogwarts of architecture. It is a magical, inspiring experiment in architecture education, and the miracle is that unlike many design school startups, SCI-ARC succeeded, turned out several thousand graduates, and is considered one of the top architecture schools in the country. Ray died in his 90s in 2019, but joining us from Los Angeles is his wife and SCI-ARC co-founder, Shelly Kappe, and their son, Finn Kappe. You can see all of Ray's houses at usmodernist.org/Kappe. That's spelled Kappe. Later on, we've got jazz from the UK with Claire Martin. And now, dreaming of Ray and Shelly Kappe's house, here's your host, Mr. Modernism, George Smart.
Thanks, Tom. The first thing you notice about Ray and Shelly Kappe's beautiful modernist house in the Pacific Palisades area of Los Angeles is how it just couldn't be built today. The building code people would have heart attacks coming in the front door. From the outside, the Kappe house looks like a normal, architecturally designed modernist home, except for the intense but carefully selected landscaping that gently caresses the house like a friendly jungle. And there's a jaguar in the carport.
To complete the jungle theme.
Once you enter, there are many levels and stairs and connectors and viewpoints, almost all without railings.
Ooh.
Watch your step, that's an understatement. But once you've started watching your steps, you discover the genius of Ray and Shelly's realized masterpiece. Each room is not only separated by walls, but by elevation, so you get a sumptuous buffet of structure and scale and size as you move around and up and down. On the East Coast, think Paul Rudolph. Shelly Kappe and son Finn graciously navigated me through the steps and levels to their dining room, where we got to talk about Ray's legacy. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by Diane Bald and the Budman family, restoring significant architecture in Toronto, Los Angeles, Malibu, and Palm Springs.
Shelly Kappe is an educator, architectural historian, and the co-founder of the Southern California Institute of Architecture, SCI-ARC, where she served as the inaugural director of the Architectural Gallery and taught architectural history, among many other roles. Shelly and Ray's son, Finn Kappe, grew up in Los Angeles in homes designed by his father and surrounded by the work of other modernist greats. An architect himself, Finn attended SCI-ARC and has served as a lecturer there. He also worked for years with his father, Ray. Here's George's conversation inside the incredible Kappe house with Shelly and Finn Kappe.
I want to start, Shelly, with the year 1970. So if my calculations are correct, that's when you and Ray are at Cal Poly, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So what happens at Cal Poly that makes you all want to go off and do your own thing?
Well, the administration wasn't very supportive, and architecture was growing. Ray had founded the architecture program, and that made it possible to establish a School of Environmental Design within the university, and that was a bonus for the university, and architecture began to grow, and it had about 300 students in 3 years. And it was going well, and I was helping with programs on the side. The loyal volunteer, wherever Ray went, I was also involved. I think it was precipitated by the dean, who was a little bit annoyed at the importance that Ray was becoming very important as the founder of the architecture program, and he started to make trouble. And Ray told him what he thought of him for doing that, and the dean asked him to resign. And when the students heard about it, they started a whole big demonstration, and they had T-shirts that said "Kappe now."
Oh, really?
And building posters that said "Our Godfather" with Ray's image.
Uh-huh.
And helicopters.
Helicopters?
Yeah,
That's a new one.
because architecture students were demonstrating.
Yeah. These were news helicopters, I guess. Okay.
Yeah. Ray just decided that it wasn't going well. He wasn't happy, and he wasn't getting the support that one would like in the program. And so we started thinking about starting a new program. It was a time when alternative thinking was coming to the forefront. So we became an alternative program. And there was a lot of interest in that kind of thing. It was 1972 by then. And so he resigned, and first the Professors Union wanted to make a thing about it against the administration because it was arbitrary,
Right.
with no basis. And then when that came through the way the professors wanted it, it was a victorious case within the administration system, he resigned. And he leased a building in Santa Monica, and we started the school. We were 6 faculty, 7 with Ray as director, and we had 75 students, most of whom came from Cal Poly. And then the students ran around the country talking about what was going on, and there was a lot of news coverage. It was in the papers.
Oh, yes, I've read the original accounts about this.
So we had about 25 more. We had 75 students.
So most faculty, when they're rebuffed by their dean, just go and get a job at another university. What had you all want to start your own school?
Well, students were very supportive and enthusiastic. And Ray knew that there were a lot of students out there who wanted to study architecture. And once he started, he just never had a doubt that we would be successful. And of course, I always went along with his judgment. It was usually pretty good. We just started off, and we were accredited in just 4 years.
That's amazing.
It was a record. And people came from all over. They heard about it, and they were interested, and so they would come and give lectures.
Now, Finn, how old were you in 1972?
15.
15? So what was this like for you as a teenager to see all this going on?
I didn't really see much of what happened at Cal Poly. I have a couple things to add about your good question.
Yeah.
After SCI-ARC got started, I did see what was going on. The thing I wanted to add about that question that I've come to understand from my dad's oral history and things like this is he had kind of a longer trajectory about education, architectural education, and an interest. And it started with his personal assessment of the USC program when he was doing a little teaching there. And then he was invited to interview at Cal Poly because Bernard Zimmerman invited him out there. And he brought this critique of architectural programs with him in the interview. He got that position. They had started this program, what was it, in 3 years? They built up the program in Cal Poly. And there was this other aspect that I find really interesting. He wanted there to be complete balance in the environmental design program between architecture, planning, and landscape. So he wanted equal students, equal energy, and so on, because I think that was his broader ideal about the built environment. it should be a united front between those three disciplines, and even architecture, though it's the most obvious built form, should not outstrip the other two. And so when the program got built up and it started succeeding, they started putting more students into the architecture program because it had energy and draw, and of course you get tuition there. This, I believe, was his objection. It was like, that is not what we agreed upon. That's not what was supposed to happen. And so, although more students is good, more resources and backing is not good with more students coming at you. So it started getting to be pressured in that way. And I think that's what instigated this very direct exchange between my dad and the dean. And then the energy was already on the rise from the 6th faculty and the new school and the students. And so now when the head got cut off, they were not even started yet, so they wanted another place to go to continue. And that became SCI-ARC. And I think that community energy was the magic of SCI-ARC and the genesis of SCI-ARC, in my opinion. And I find that fascinating and the most interesting of things. Then the way it was orchestrated and directed originally by my dad, I think, left such an interesting way for it to operate with freedom and individuality and a lot of strong personalities. It's both the reason why it exists 50 years later and the surprise that it exists 50 years later. Very interesting story to me, one of the best.
There were many comparisons between SCI-ARC and the Bauhaus when this school was started. And in looking back now, some 50 years, it seems like at least one of the differences between the two was the fact that Ray knew how to do accounting. Is that right?
Well, he knew enough about business that he could run the school because he did everything. He did the program, and he also balanced the budget and did the hiring, and he knew how to do all that. It was easy for him. He made everything look easy. And after all, we had 2 sons, and they both became architects. Mm-hmm. And that's because Dad made it look so easy. He just could be a dad and play sports and be a family man and also run a practice. And so we do have 2 more architects in the family, very talented and successful.
Finn, did you and your brother know right away that you were going to become architects, or did it just hit you one day?
Did not think of becoming an architect until I was in my 20s.
Okay.
Although I'd done a little early work. When I was 14, I built a model for one of the projects at Charmley, a nature center. And when I was still in high school, I took the first-year design studio at SCI-ARC. And then I kind of headed in other directions. And after a couple years of college, came back to take on an opportunity to build one of Dad's houses, the Bourget house on Latimer. Uh-huh. I was 22. It was a huge undertaking, and I learned an awful lot. It was,
this is the one with all the blocks in it,
all the block
right?
and the overblown greenhouse.
Yes,
steel.
I've been in that house. Yes,
yeah.
With
So that
the curved ceiling.
With the curved ceiling.
So in the 70s, we had the Title 24 energy compliance came into the picture. A lot of glass became questioned in architecture, and so you had to come up with alternative ways of complying. At any rate, at that time, I built that, and then I started going to SCI-ARC, and that was when I committed to architectural education. And even then, it wasn't a do-or-die commitment. It was a sort of year-by-year commitment, like I'm going to do this and see how far I go with it, and it kept going.
Thank goodness.
It sounds like that you all knew that SCI-ARC was going to last fairly early on, I would think, especially after it was accredited so quickly.
Well, you mentioned the Bauhaus. The Bauhaus was an alternative school as well, and separated from university, and it only lasted 10 years. And Ray created SCI-ARC with enough flexibility to withstand the changes of the decades that we went through. And here we are celebrating our 50th anniversary. Another mention of the Bauhaus was Conrad Voxman was a friend of Gropius and colleague of the people who started the Bauhaus. And when he came to visit, he said, "This is like the new Bauhaus," which was a supreme compliment.
I love looking at the videos that include you introducing the speakers that were there in that first 10 or 15 years. There's one that we have referenced on our website with Harwell Hamilton Harris, who eventually moved to Raleigh to teach at NC State.
Yes.
And there he is in all his glory, and you've got these black and white films.
Yeah.
And the slides going behind. And by slides, I don't mean PowerPoint. I mean like Kodak slides that were flashing up on the screen. You'd hear that noise. It would go ka-chunk, 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 ka-chunk.
Absolutely.
That lecture series was really incredible. Who were some of the people that came through?
Everyone I could get to come. Everyone was interested, and Harwell Harris was an architect who Ray admired. You know, he was an L.A. guy and was involved with Neutra and admired Frank Lloyd Wright. And then Green and Green was also very important, those houses. And that influenced Harwell, and that influenced Ray. And so we had a relationship with him and went to visit him when he moved. And he came here and stayed here in this house.
He did, okay.
Yeah. Well, you know, we started the lecture series because Ray felt there wasn't enough discussion in the city about architecture. So I carried through, and we started the lecture series, and I invited just everyone we could think of. Everyone wanted to come, very well attended. And of course, we didn't charge. It was a free lecture. And it was every Wednesday night. And I discussed with the other schools. There was USC and there was Cal Poly. I suggested to them that they choose another night so that students would have opportunity to hear more than one lecture in a week. It was a pretty rich environment that was going on there. Ron Heron of the Archigram group in London came to visit. He said that it felt like London. There was so much going on. And before we started SCI-ARC, that was not the case.
And how did you decide to film them? Because that really wasn't done hardly at all during that era. It
wasn't, no. We had experienced videotape, I think, in London at the AA, and it was very new then, and I thought it was terrific, and Ray liked it. And when we started our lecture series, we were in a 3-story building that Ray had leased initially, and it worked out very well. On the upper floor, we hadn't found a use for it yet, and so he leased it to a video group, and we were already intrigued with video.
Yeah.
And so we had kind of an exchange that we used their equipment till we had our own later on, and that's how we got into videotaping.
And this was old school equipment. This was before VHS. I believe it was that like 1 1/4 inch tapes, right? Those big old tapes with the big cameras.
Yes.
And it's a miracle all this has survived.
Well, yeah, because the lifespan isn't that long, and the problem was getting budget from successive directors to retape and prolong. And I know I was very concerned at one time, and so I organized a tour of some of Ray's houses to raise some money so that we could retape the tapes and keep them going. I'm so happy that so many of them are still in existence. And I hear stories from people who use the archive. Now it's on YouTube.
Yeah.
It's, I think, internationally considered a good resource.
It's fantastic.
So that feels good to have started something that's so useful.
And now, because it's in digital form, it really will last a long time.
Yes, they're all digitized.
So, Finn, in being an observer to this school and a participant for so long, how has the school changed over time?
I don't know.
Well,
one way of looking at it is sort of the form generators of architecture. You know, what were the concerns and interests of how you make architecture? And when SCI-ARC started, one of the strong voices, I think, was Glenn Small. He was involved with visionary ideas of biomorphic biospheres, and you had kind of tetrahedral shapes and structures and Bucky Fuller influence and possibilities, things in that direction, very big ideas. And also organic structures, things related to nature. And that lasted for quite a while and relates to organic architecture and embraces all of those sorts of good things from right through mid-century and so on. And then things started shifting and changing as I think the times changed and the faculty members got more mature and there were some other ideas and voices. And so you move eventually into a postmodernist era, which was not very popular for us. We didn't really support that very much. And then beyond to deconstruction and on and on. So as the architecture world evolves and new trends evolve and interests and explorations and new technologies, SCI-ARC changes as well in terms of some of the faculty members. I mean, 5 decades, that's a long time. So if we look at who's still there from the beginning, I don't think there's anybody there from the very beginning anymore, and it still exists. So that's a fantastic thing, and yet people continually sort of point out that they feel the connection to the beginning and to the roots of SCI-ARC, and that again is quite fun, very special that exists somehow.
You moved from that initial 3-story building to a new complex at some point, right?
Well, I wanted to address your question about how it changes.
Sure. We'll come back to that.
There have been 5 different directors now.
Okay.
And when postmodernism started becoming interesting to people and especially to the publications, they loved anything that was new and different. We tried to counter it. I was teaching history by then, and Ray was teaching a design class in addition to the administration. And it was a very hard thing to counter because there was so much publication. So that's when we decided to retire.
That was about the time Philip Johnson was revving up all the postmodern
some of it,
hysteria.
Yeah,
yes.
It was in the 80s, and Ray could have stayed on as director if he wanted to, but he thought the younger people who were more involved in what was going on should take over. And that's what happened to the school. With each directorship, there was some change because of the interest of the director. But still, Ray created it with the feeling of freedom and inclusiveness and flexibility. And that's what allowed SCI-ARC to continue. And I think that was the secret of success in that respect.
Were students able to create a lot of their own curriculum in a way or where they wanted to head? Was that where the flexibility was?
Well, we did allow that, and there was a little bit of it. But in the end, the students wanted a regular program.
Coursework, yeah.
That's why things always return.
Yes. There have been a number of these new schools around the country, and yours, as far as I know, is the only one that has really lasted. Have there been any others that you know of that are still around?
No, but I think that we inspired others to try, but they didn't have Ray Kappe.
No.
With the vision and the knowledge, seriously.
Now, one of your contributions to LA and to architecture was you were very active in pushing for historical designations for buildings.
Somewhat, not tremendously. I wasn't involved. I was more involved in what I was doing for SCI-ARC. But I participated in some of those movements, yes.
But really before that time, in the 80s and 90s, there wasn't much attention at all given to historical preservation, and certainly not of the modernist houses that had come along in the 40s, 50s, and 60s.
Mm-hmm. Well, there is an organization, can't think of it right now, but
LA Conservancy?
The Conservancy, absolutely, yeah. They're the ones who are most interested in conserving, especially the modern houses. Yeah,
they're a great organization.
I participated, but are on the periphery. Wherever I could help, I did.
Okay.
But my main focus was SCI-ARC and programs that we made and publicizing those programs and participating in some of them. I was a great believer in field trips and seeing architecture and experiencing the spaces inside. If I could get students inside, that was always the goal. And when we started our European Studies program, the field trips in Europe were unbelievably exciting.
When was this?
I think the late 70s. 78 was our first trip.
Okay.
And actually, we had Ron Heron participating, and because we knew him quite well from London, and one of our students, or one of our graduates, was Swiss, Martin Wagner, and he helped us set up the European Studies program. We were able to buy a building and restore it so students could go. It was in the south of Switzerland, a little town in the hills called Vico Morcote, and it was very close to Lugano. Mm-hmm. So it was overlooking the lake.
Yes, beautiful.
Students could go and live and study, and when I was there, I took them on field trips that were pretty exciting.
I bet.
And it was always a challenge to me to get them inside, And so
that's a challenge with us, too. We're always taking people on tours and
yes,
trying to get them inside.
Yeah, well, I was pretty successful. It was a very popular program for 35 years.
So is it still going to some extent?
No, because one of the directors closed it down.
Okay.
He didn't have any interest in it.
But I assume that the graduates of SCI-ARC, and based on what I've read, they've also won a lot of different scholarships and prizes and awards and are still seeking some of that international experience on their own.
Oh, well, I hope that's true. They're all over the world. Our graduates are all over the world, either teaching or writing or working. I've lost track of the numbers, but hundreds of thousands of students in 50 years.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
You asked me about what it sort of looked like early on in the SCI-ARC days, and listening to what we were just discussing reminded me that one of the most amazing things was the Cal Poly trip to Europe. And this is one of the first European trips, taking a group of architecture students. Mom and Dad led them and took the whole family along too, which was really a great thing that they did. They incorporated all of us early on with big trips. This was a 3-month experience in Europe for a 13-year-old. That was me.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't even know where I lived anymore by the time we ended that trip. But it was pretty incredible to travel around with some of those students. Some of them were so nice and really interesting. In those days, the organization consisted of putting out the next address and the next city and see you there. It wasn't everybody herded into a bus or train or plane or any of that. Everybody was on their own, and here's where you're going to be at this time on this date, and we will regroup here. And that's how that whole planning worked. And it was a great experience for me as a kid, one of the greatest trips I've ever had. So that was pre-SCI-ARC, but it was in that time of doing those sorts of things, and that Mom and Dad thought were okay to do. Here we go. We're going to go for 3 months with this group of people. And all the people that went on those trips have huge memories, of course. It was just great. So I wanted to add that about the early days.
Particularly for a young person, as young as you were at the time.
Yeah.
That just had to have been fascinating.
Yeah, it was amazing. Yeah. Some of it as a 13-year-old I didn't understand, but it was a lifelong influence and many impressions. One of the favorites was, of course, being in the VW van driving down the coast of Yugoslavia, because that was like driving down Highway 1 here in California. We'd just stop and have picnics and go to the beach and swim and all that.
Jumped in the water.
That was idyllic.
Well, when we learned to travel, we wanted students to know how to travel. And so we taught them. The business of saying, see you in the next town. By then they knew how to do it, and they knew how to look for housing where they would stay. And because we shared all that, it was very successful. We traveled many times that way, but the trip that Finn's talking about was our first. So that was a huge trip for all of us, a huge learning experience. It was just a wonderful time.
Was SCI-ARC accepted among the sort of architectural school community of, the Yales and other places as it got started, or was it just those rambunctious people in California doing their thing?
I hope not. No, I think we were pretty well respected, and some of our people went there. Our graduates went there for graduate work before we started our own graduate studies.
And the fact that you got accredited so quickly must have been just huge as far as credibility and respect throughout the country.
It was. Well, one of the things we haven't talked about is how we started SCI-ARC and the kind of support that it had, because Ray had been active in AIA. Mm-hmm. So he was a credible person. He'd been active locally and in the California Council and even national. So he was very well known and respected for his architecture as well as his service. So they supported SCI-ARC, and that was huge to have the support of the profession.
So Finn, let me come back to my other question. Finn, you're also a musician, and you've incorporated music in some of your architectural teaching. How does that work?
It's pretty interesting. Architecture gets talked about as frozen music now and again. And there's a good reason for that, whether it's visual resonance or things like that. But when you come right down to it, it's challenging to map music to architecture or architecture to music. Each one is a deep practice of its own. Personally, I have taught that a little bit, and it's been interesting and somewhat successful in occasions. My own critique is that you need to be an expert at both to do such a thing, to go from music as an inspiration for making architecture or vice versa. You need to be able to critically identify so many aspects about it. Otherwise, it becomes referential, which is also okay. Inspirational or referential, that's fair as well. Anything that gets you going, and enables you to do better work. Personally, I note that in my compositional efforts and my design efforts, there's a very similar space that I'm inhabiting when I'm doing either one. So that might be the most telling comment I could give you, that it's a very fun and interesting creative space, and they feel quite similar, like similar triangles, geometrically speaking.
Well, I have to ask, did that ever result in something like a symphony hall or a music recital building?
That would be nice.
Not yet.
But not yet.
Not yet?
Not yet. I don't think I committed far enough to it as a study practice or a teaching subject.
I learned about Ray Kappe fairly late in the game through Steve Glenn and the Living Homes project, where you worked on, right?
I did.
And that was exciting, but I've seen conflicting reports, so I want to have you help me sort this out here. So some of these things say that these living home houses were put together like in record time, like 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, and others.
One day.
It was, yeah. So how did it all work to happen so fast?
Well, these are modular prefab buildings, one form of them. And the more you can complete in the factory off-site, the quicker it gets assembled on-site. So the assembling or the erection of the buildings on site rarely takes more than 2 days. So in a day or two, you have this whole framework of house building, including some percentage of completed everything, MEP, glazing, finishes. There are connection points that need to be left open for waterproofing and finishing of materials. So it just really depended on the situation. Some of them got finished quite quickly after they got to the site, and others took longer. I think the goal is to be 85% complete in the factory before you roll.
Okay.
And if you don't get that far, it's going to take a lot of time in the field to wrap it up. And if you do get to 85%, then you can see that you don't have far to go to button everything up and complete the home. But you need a little more time.
So with living homes and prefabs in general, do you have to do a lot of site preparation? I mean, what do you have to do to get it ready for the cranes and the trucks to come?
Yeah, this is all the groundwork, So if you have a hillside site or even a flat site, you have your foundation and all the infrastructure, your plumbing and waistline and MEP work that comes from underground. So in order to plug and play, you need to put those pieces together properly and have things fit up. So the crane is dropping the boxes. You need a nice, accurate matching of the bolts to the frames and so on. So there's a complete effort on site. And one of the great time savers is that you can be doing that on site while the house is being built in the factory, obviously. Normally, stick construction, site-built construction, you finish the foundation and then you call the framer to come to the site. In the prefab world, you finish the foundation work on site and you call for the house to be delivered. It's a big difference.
Yeah. In the magazines, when they would talk about prefabs, they always made it sound like the house was built in a day, which for us mere mortals who are not architects sounds like there was this lot, and then 24 hours later there was a house on it. But the site preparation takes a good amount of time. It takes a couple of months, right?
Yeah, depending on the site. It could be, it totally depends on the site. It can go fast on a flat site. Hillside is hillside, takes a little more effort and energy and time. But again, the construction is a very disruptive thing. And for the neighborhood, the compression of time is fantastic. I mean, at the most, you have a matter of months and this house is done rather than a couple of years. So that's fantastic. That goes along with the credo of smaller ecological footprint and so on and so forth. And that's a part of it. You know, getting all the workers to go to a factory and produce the work there and then shipping. It's a good goal. It's growing quite a bit now. You know, when Living Homes started, I think they're early in the game, really, even though the discussion had been on the table for decades. But when Living Homes started, it was early in the curve. Now it's getting pretty solid as a viable way to be producing work, and obviously environmentally, it's preferred if you can do it.
Well, the first living home that was built, Ray had designed, and it went up in one day. By 5 o'clock, we were on the roof watching the sunset. So it is possible once the groundwork is done and everything is ready to go, then the crane comes in and brings everything, and they grab them and they bolt them, and it just goes up very quickly.
It's a giant erector set, like on Christmas Day.
Yeah, well, it's the bare bones, of course.
Yeah.
Then there has to be a lot of infill work.
Now, one of the promises of prefab for almost 100 years has been that these things were going to get built at the factory and they were going to be less expensive than doing it on site by yourself. But by and large, these projects end up costing about the same or even more sometimes than doing.
The problem is you need a developer with the vision who's ready to build many of them. If many of them are built, then the price goes down.
Right. So that's my next question. Are you aware that the promise of these lower cost prefabs has been realized anywhere by a developer that's doing this at some sort of scale?
Not so far.
Okay. Do you know of anything?
I can't think of anyone. I think it's still out there as the holy grail of prefab, as you've stated, for sure. But it is a matter of numbers. It's a numbers game. I mean, when we did our work, every project was really, to me, the CEO did not appreciate this language, but to me, it was full-scale prototyping. So that's not the cheapest product.
Yeah.
But if you had 200 of them, 500, 1,000, you would have a real assembly line. But, you know, because that's what they refer to, the line, the production line. There is no production line for one of anything.
Yeah.
You know, so once you get multiples, you can fine-tune it, tweak it, the price point comes down, you get, you know, the economy of scale, all the obvious sort of things, economically speaking. But then you're trying to create variety, so you could have 5 models, just like they do. And as Mom said, a developer who wanted 5 models that were all prefabricated, and you had 600 units total. The problem is actually stick build is still quite cheap for developers.
Yes,
it's really hard to beat their prices on a flat site. But even time-wise, they're fast. So it's not so easy, but it's still a right goal. It's a right goal.
Someday.
What do the two of you think of these new emerging technologies like 3D printed houses, where the little robot comes around and squirts toothpaste all around out of concrete or some other structure?
Take it.
Yeah, well, I think that in terms of providing housing in areas where there are no houses, this is beautiful. I think that there are limitations to every technology, and that kind of technology, as far as I know, has limitations in terms of openings, light and space. So it has its architectural limits, but in terms of producing housing at an affordable cost and in areas that need that sort of thing, it's great. You know, all those sorts of solutions, that shipping containers, all the sort of stuff that obviously has certain limitations, but creates safe places for people to live who don't have anything at all. And I think maybe I'm selling this technology short, but so far I think it's sort of in this realm. No doubt it'll go further. And the 3D printing, you know, that is a scale issue. But I think it's fascinating. I think it's good.
As you look for the future of Ray's legacy, what do you want him to be remembered for the most?
Wow. That's a wonderful question.
Coach of my Little League baseball team.
That too.
A winning season, Finn?
Sure.
Yeah.
I think, you know, for his architectural talent, his ability to handle space like no other, and his vision educationally for having set up a system, let's say, that could go on. You know, he wanted SCI-ARC to have an air of freedom and interest for the students to be involved. And I think that still goes on. Different directors, different emphasis, but that feeling is still there. It's still an exciting place to walk into at any hour. And I think that goes on.
Does it still have that balance Ray wanted of architecture, planning, and landscape?
No, not necessarily. It depends on the instructors. If an individual instructor wanted to emphasize those areas, they could. But those feelings were at Cal Poly when there were individual programs, and he wanted to encourage sharing and combining forces and working together and that kind of thing. But at SCI-ARC, it's mostly architecture.
Okay. And good architecture it is. It is such a famous school.
Very, very imaginative with computer capabilities now. So that's changed a lot.
Are you familiar with the 10 principles?
I'm not.
I find this interesting more and more as the years go by. My dad was asked about the 10 most important principles that helped him be a successful architect, planner, and educator. And some of these play, along with his very strong independent streak and his, I think the other thing that he had was a ability to teach himself what he was interested in. And I think that played at SCI-ARC a lot. That influence on young people, tacitly to say, this is how I like to do it. I assume it's what you want to do too. So that made space for them to do exactly that and become as strong as they could be in their ways. These 10 principles, number 1, think positively, not negatively. 2, accept structure, but know that it is to be questioned and broken when necessary. 3, always be willing to explore, experiment, and invent. Do not accept the status quo. 4, know yourself and keep your work consistent with who you are and how you think. 5, maintain good moral and social values. 6, be humble, honest, compassionate, and egalitarian. 7, have a conviction about your work. 8, be open and say yes to most ideas and requests. The good ones will be valuable. The bad ones will cease to exist. 9, allow employees and fellow workers freedom and the ability to work to their strengths. Avoid hierarchy. 10, money should be the residual of work, not the goal, but do not compromise your worth.
Now, Finn, are these inscribed on tablets somewhere?
Yeah, there's 2 tablets, 5 on each.
Okay, excellent. I think that's what we need. Thank you both. This has been great.
Thank you.
Thank you, George.
English jazz singer Claire Martin, OBE, credits her parents' love of jazz for setting her on a path that would lead to 8 British Jazz Awards and countless collaborations with the world's best jazz musicians. Claire began her career as a singer for the Savoy Hotel Band in London at the age of 19, and then she traveled the world singing in the piano bar of the cruise liner Queen Elizabeth II. By age 21, she was singing at Ronnie Scott's famous club in London. Claire then signed with Lynn Records in 1990, which was 20 albums ago. Her latest album, Songs and Stories, is a collaboration with musician and composer Callum Au, and it features 82 musicians in her first big band recording. She's been called one of the 5 finest female jazz vocalists on the planet. Welcome, Claire.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
So, Claire, before we get started, tell our American listeners what OBE stands for, and what was it like to get that designation from the late Queen Elizabeth?
So we have an award system here. It's given twice a year, was on the Queen's birthday and the Queen's New Year's honours list. And you could get an MBE or an OBE or a knighthood, a damehood that's kind of different. OBE is the Order of the British Empire, or it could be Officer of the British Empire, which I hope it's not, because the British Empire's, you know, let's just say people have views on that, including me. So I got a letter, my agent had a letter saying they would like to award me one for recognition of my work in jazz. And I thought it was a joke. I thought it was my brother doing a prank or something. But it turned out to be true. And I took my parents and we had a day in the palace and the Queen had a headache.
Oh,
and
no.
I had the king. I had Charles, who's now the king, but at the time was Prince Charles, because the Queen was feeling unwell, and it's just one of those things. He was fantastic, though. He was good fun, and it was quite the day out. And they give you a medal, and off you go, and you have this wonderful day. It was. I mean, it's an honour. I took it because it shone a light on jazz music, which needs help in any way, and it was. I kind of accepted it on behalf of all the women in jazz. I mean, I ummed and ahed at first, but then I thought, no, that this is going to be good. This can help me. So that's what it means. It hasn't really changed much, but it's good if you're writing a complaint letter, like you complain it, and you say, yours sincerely, Claire Martin, OBE, and then all of a sudden they answer really quickly, and you get lots of freebies.
Snap to attention, yes.
That's about it.
Was this one of those occasions, Claire, where you had to wear a special hat?
Yeah, it was. I had to go and buy they're called a fascinator. I had to go and buy a fascinator, which was like a clip thing. I didn't want a big
Isn't that
hat,
what they wear at the racetrack?
Yeah, a fascinator. So I went with my friend. I mean, it's been in the drawer ever since, you can imagine. But there I was, and I bought this new dress, and had these shoes on, and they were quite high, these shoes, and you're not allowed to turn your back on the royalty. You can't, get your medal and go, cheers, mate, and then turn around. You got to walk backwards, and it was quite the effort because I had really high heels on. But I was 43, so yeah, that was 12 years ago I got that. So
wow.
Yeah, I'm very proud of it.
Now, at some point, you had to have played for the actual Queen Elizabeth, right? Not just her ship.
Well, I did meet her in another. I did go into the palace on another. They were doing a celebration of British music, all across different genres, and she did come into that room there. It was quite awe-inspiring. She had such gravitas. I didn't sing, but I was part of the. I was on the invitations. I got listed in, and I met Kate Bush and Joan Armatrading, and
wow.
But I didn't actually sing for her. That's a shame.
This next song was never a big hit during its prime, which was 1971, but after Gene Wilder died in 2016, the song Pure Imagination had a new life and a new audience. From the movie Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, not the one with Johnny Depp, the original. It was written by Leslie Bricusse and Anthony Newley expressly for the movie in just one day. Here's Claire with Pure Imagination.
Take a look and you'll see into your imagination. We'll begin with a spin, traveling in a world of my creation. What you'll see will defy explanation. If you want to view paradise, simply look around and view it. Anything you want to do it. Want to change the world, there's nothing to it. There is no life I know that compares with pure imagination. Living there, you'll be free if you truly wish to be. Simply look around and view it. Anything you want to do it. Want to change the world, there's nothing to it. There is no life I know that compares with pure imagination. Living there, you'll be free if you truly wish to be. If you truly wish to be. If you truly wish.
That's from Claire's album, Songs and Stories. Claire, I'm surprised that this was your first recording with a big band or orchestra. What brought that about?
I think when Callum Hour approached me, he's like the young gun arranger in the UK at the moment. He wanted to make a sort of calling card of his skills with this record and this idea. Very kindly asked me to be the singer. And it was kind of his baby, and I was basically a hired gun. But we spent a long time looking at the material and putting it together and making it work. So I was very grateful. I think it's because somebody approached me rather than the record labels that I've been with before. It's a lot of people to pay, 82 people.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so Callum made the investment in himself and his work, and it's paid off, because since that record, he's now arranging for Michael Bublé. He's doing stuff for Andrew Lloyd Webber. He's all over all sorts of different big bands and orchestras. And it's, it really, for me, it was a dream come true and great at my time in my career. But for Callum, it was a perfect opportunity for him to really showcase his talent, because he's such a wise old soul for 30 years old, and such an incredibly gifted musician and arranger, big ears and a big heart. And
don't sell your voice short.
I'm not selling my bill.
Wrap yourself around that song.
Thank you.
Like
actually,
magic.
as I was listening back, I was thinking it's quite low. Yeah, I mean, I did my best for him. And just very recently, just done another orchestral album with an orchestra, but not with a big band. He had sort of everybody in there. So, yeah, it was great. It was a great collaboration. It was a meeting of minds and a meeting of musical ideas. And I'm just so pleased for him. The music scene needs more people like Callum.
Claire, tell us about this next song, Believe in It, which is from your album, Believe in It.
Believe in it, yeah. So my trio that I work with as much as I can are Swedish. 3 guys that I met on a tour a few years back, and I just loved them. And I said, come on, we've got to make a record and do as much as we can. Then, of course, the blimmin' pandemic slowed up our touring schedule, and the B word, Brexit, is making it harder to tour in Europe for us. Anyway, yeah, it's just tricky and lots of paperwork and admin, and it's a disaster, frankly. You probably know that. So when we did this album, it was just before, it was 2019, and Believe in It is a song I learned from one of the great jazz singers who thankfully is still with us. His name is Andy Bay, pianist singer. He's in New York. He was Andy Bay and the Bay Sisters were very big in the 50s and 60s. He's a phenomenal talent. And I was just listening to Andy Bay one day at the airport, and I heard him sing this song. And I thought, that is really up my alley, that song. And he did a scat solo. And I have a friend, a lyricist friend, who lives here in Brighton, the south coast of England. And I said, will you put some words to his scat so I can make it, we call that a vocalese when you sing scat. And so she's so clever. So she did the vocalese. And I was able to send it to Andy. I was really proud of it. So I'm doffing the cap to one of our great, still living legends of music, Andy Bay. And it's a bit of a tongue twister, so it was a good challenge. And it's also my lovely Swedish trio who swing like the clappers. So that's Believe in It.
Great. Here's Claire Martin with Believe in It.
Found a reason, something to believe in, something so pure, something so right. Anyone can see it, we can all agree that this is so good, it's got to be tight. Life's illusion gives you something you can use and make it through the day and keep you warm at night. You can carry on now, confident and strong now, so the story goes. The pain and pleasure seem to come together. Neither light nor shadow, no black or white, what seems to sit together begs the question whether is it here or there, or is it wrong or right? Try to find the middle, even it out. Try to solve the riddle, figure it out. What seems to be so certain is riddle but doubt. Believe in it. If you find a reason, something to believe in, something so pure, something so right. Anyone can see it, they can all agree that this so good, it's got to be tight. Why do we struggle with it? We get muddled in it. No, your eyes don't deceive. It's a breeze, just believe in it. 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 Do we need to see just to believe, or do we always have to hear or taste or feel to know if something's real? Not surprising when philosophizing really won't suffice. Ain't no rhyme or reason. It often seems so very hard for us to just trust everything. Will it be happening as should? It's all good, although we think in private that if we held all the cards, things could be better. Trying to play every part, just letting go is an art. You can find an even deeper peace within. Don't get distracted, kick back, relax, and then watch your spirit rising, thriving and surviving. Breathe and electrify, nice and crazy, God, up on high in the circus, balancing wide and wondrous, without a safety net below us, holding on to something greater, take a leap of faith and stop believing it. Found a reason, something to believe in, something so pure, something so right. Anyone can see it, we can all agree that this is so good, it's got to be tight. Life's illusion gives you something you can use and make it through the day and keep you warm at night. You can carry on now, confident and strong now, so the story goes. The point where pain and pleasure seem to come together, neither light nor shadow, no black or white, but seem to sit together. Begs the question whether is it here or there, or is it wrong or right? Try to find the middle, even it out, try to solve the riddle, figure it out. What seemed to be so certain is riddled with doubt. Believe in it.
You don't need 83 musicians or whatever that other recording was. What's that, 4 of you?
That's the 4 of us, yeah. And a lot of words.
Yes, it is. A lot more words. That's great.
Thank you. Yeah, they're great. I miss them. I really miss those guys.
Claire, what's your next project? I understand you're going to be working with Scott Dunn.
Dunn, we've just finished. Thank you for asking, George. We have literally just finished a couple of weeks ago. Scott Dunn is an American arranger and conductor, pianist, fine musician, and a dear friend of my friend, the late Sir Richard Rodney Bennett, who we loved and adored. And he left such a body of work. And Scott and I, for years, have said, let's try and do something to remember him by and to celebrate his amazing work, his legacy. So we chose 16 songs, mostly written by Richard, or Richard and Johnny Mandel, or Richard and other writers, and also some songs that Richard just loved to sing, like Autumn in New York and It's Only a Paper Moon. And Scott did some great arrangements, and we recorded them in August with the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra.
Nice.
Which was, it was just huge joy. We've just mastered it, and it will come out next year. And hopefully with Scott's, he's American, he's out there, he knows the venues, I'll be able to come over and recreate the album and do songs and do more gigs out there. I've needed, not a champion as such, but I've needed a reason and someone on the ground out there to help me get the gigs out there, because I can get smaller jazz gigs, but the thing about being English and coming to America to sing is we need work visas. Americans coming here can just come. Oh. But when we go to you, we need a day in the embassy. We need a letter. We need to have an interview about why it's us. We need to pay about £1,500 to do one gig, and then there's the airfares and the hotel. So
I'll make a call.
Yeah,
we'll take care of this for you.
Yeah,
because we have friends in high places, you know.
I really would love that. If anybody wants to be my sponsor, I'd be grateful. So I'll get an O1 visa, I hope, which will give me a 3-year window. My daughter is in an American university. She's a basketball player in a Division I basketball college down in Louisiana.
Which one?
She's at Nicholls State University.
Okay.
So she's in a junior year now, her 3rd year. So it'd be great. I could go and do some gigs and pop down and see some games. So everything is lined up now for me to get over stateside, because I've missed it. I've missed working out there. It's such an amazing place to be. It's the home of jazz. People just like hearing my accent when I speak. So I'm sort of I'm ahead of the game before I start.
That's true. Never hurts to leverage that.
Claire, we can't wait to have you come over here. Thank you so much for joining us.
My absolute pleasure. And what a great idea to marry architecture with jazz. I truly appreciate your time, guys. Thank you for spreading the word for my music.
Thanks for listening. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by Diane Bald and the Budman family. restoring significant architecture in Toronto, Los Angeles, Malibu, and Palm Springs.
Visit usmodernist.org's massive archives to listen to past shows, discover documentation of 15,000 significant modernist houses, and access 4 million pages of classic 20th century architecture magazines. U.S. Modernist Radio is produced by Soundtracks Recording Studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. Our theme song was performed by George Smart and Robinson Earl. Archivist Kelly Policelli found time away from documenting Dan Duckham, our favorite new alliteration, to do guest research. Look for our Duckham archive in the coming weeks. U.S. Modernist Radio is a production of Modernist Archive Incorporated, a nonprofit educational archive for the documentation, preservation, and promotion of modernist residential design. I'm Tom Guild. George and I will be back soon with another multi-level Watch Your Step Building Codes Be Damned edition of U.S. Modernist Radio.